Give me a second. Okay.
Hi, this is a man they once in a while called Mr. Las Vegas. My real name is Wayne Newton, and you're listening to my good friend and favorite DJ, the only DJ my friend Elvis would approve of, Jimmy Deal.
All right, there you go. So, hey guys, it's me and Jimmy Deal and our guest, Jerry Schilling.
Yep, this month back. Hey, Jerry, how you doing? This month back on January 8th would have been Elvis Presley's 86th birthday. Today we have a very special celebrity spotlight with this very special guy. He's an original member of the Memphis Mafia, and he's a lifelong friend of Elvis Presley. Welcome to the show, Jerry Schilling. How are you, Jerry?
I'm very good, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm great. Fantastic to have you today.
Well, thanks for having me. And I know we have a few mutual good friends, and
Absolutely.
Pleasure to do something with you, Jimmy.
Oh, thanks. Well, it was great to talk to you too, Jerry. I really appreciate you coming on the show. You and Elvis met back in 1954, and it was because of a football game that brought you guys together. Is that correct, Jerry?
That's correct. It was July 11th, 1954, which is 7/11. If you've spent time in Vegas, July 11th. And it was the same week Elvis had recorded his first record, That's Right, Mama. And the night before, Dewey Phillips had played it for the first time. So when I met Elvis, he didn't have a hit record, nor did anybody know who he was unless they were listening to the radio that night.
Wow. So he was a little bit different from the other guys, right? I mean, his hair was different. He had some different clothes. Tell us about that. What did you think of Elvis when you first met him?
Yeah, well, he was a little different, but, as the iconic image grows, he was so different. I don't think so. I mean, I think him as a human being, there was something special there, almost like a James Dean quality that you would get in your pictures. But there were a group of guys at Humes High School and whatever that had ducktails and their hair was a little longer. And it wasn't just Elvis. I mean, he became the epitome of that look and everything, of course. But, I remember growing up there. I remember my older cousins. I mean, what was happening that was different that Elvis walked into was rhythm and blues. And the rhythm and blues artists they were a little more flamboyant in dress, certainly in movement on stage and all of that. Elvis was just a sponge. He was so eclectic that he picked up on everything. And he was a unique individual, but his hair wasn't that much longer, or not, as a lot of guys, older guys that I knew in high school at that time. I was in grade school.
Right. Did he have the sideburns at that point in time?
Yeah, but they weren't, as big as they became later.
Right.
It was, if you go back to the old movies of Blackboard Jungle, which was influencing the teenagers at that time, those type of movies. He was taking stuff from there like other, kids would do. It's hard to, some 50 years or 66 years later,
right,
to describe something that you experienced. That all I know is that I loved the record because I'd been listening to Dewey Phillips since I was 10 years old. I was 12. And then he interviewed him that night because people kept calling in to the radio station. And his parents found him. He was too went to a movie show, a picture show they would call it back then.
Right.
And his parents found him, and he came on the air, and he kind of stuttered, and but it was something about him that, like, I went, wow, I'd like to meet this guy. I said a little prayer that night,
Wow.
Hey, God, the neighborhood's not that big. I'd like to meet this guy from Humes High. And my mother had gone to Humes, and my older cousins were going there at
Right.
that particular time. And by fate, the next day, I kind of wandered over to the local playground park, which didn't have much there, but just dirt and horseshoes. And there were some older guys. Elvis was so unpopular at that point that he couldn't get 6 or 8 guys his own age to play.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys with him knew my older brother. And he said, Jerry, do you want to play with us? And that was Red West. Well, I knew who Red was because he was a big Memphis football player.
Right.
And I was thinking, wow, I'm in grade school and I get to play with the high school guys. Yeah. But when we got into the huddle, chose up sides they did, I realized my quarterback was the guy I had heard on the radio the night before.
Wow.
Was he different? Yes. But not so much with the hair and the sideburns at that point. It was he just had some quality that, you liked him, you wanted him to like you. He was warm and friendly, and yet he had an edge. And it was the perfect combination as far as I was concerned.
Wow. How passionate was he about football?
Well, he loved football, and we played from that. That was a Sunday afternoon. We played the next Sunday, and within 3 weeks, I mean, the word was out. Not only the record, that only took a week or so in Memphis, but people were starting to, who is this guy? What does he do? People were showing up to the football game. I thought my football days with Elvis were over because there were enough big guys that wanted to play at that point. I mean, those little football games became a lot of people would show up just to see Elvis,
Wow.
And the record took off, as we all know,
Sure.
within the week. And by the way, I'm not trying to play down in any way the uniqueness of Elvis Presley. He had a uniqueness that I have never seen since, or and because of Elvis, I've got to meet and work with a lot of film stars and music entertainers and whatever. He certainly had more charisma and more depth than anyone I've ever met in my life.
Amazing. When you first met Elvis, did you have any idea he would become the legend the world has come to know?
That he would become?
Yes. Did you have any idea?
Everybody didn't like Elvis back then.
Uh-huh.
Especially a lot of the guys. There were the long-haired guys, as I described earlier.
Right.
But then there were the football guys with crew cuts. And, Elvis and us guys, weren't their favorite guys, if you will, just in general terms. And, hey, the girls liked Elvis, some of them were those guys' girlfriends,
Right.
And then there was a group of guys like myself and a lot that just, idolized him.
Right.
But it wasn't like a lot of the movies he did where, you know, he walked around with a smile all the time singing a song. Elvis, you know, he was more of the King Creole character. He was more the James Dean, you know, good guy, rebel without a cause, you know, that type of, that's how he was in the 50s. And, you know, I think that was with all the exciting times that he did in the 60s and 70s. To me, without the 50s, there wouldn't have been an Elvis Presley. Without rhythm and blues, all of that, he dared to be different, and he wound up, even the people that didn't like him, and there were politicians and there were religious leaders. I've produced quite a few documentaries on Elvis over the years, and I've done a lot of research. And on film, we're not going to have that in music, you know, in our city. And those were, you know, political leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that old stories about you know, cornering Elvis in the bathroom in Humes High School, and Red West had to come to his rescue. They wanted to cut his hair.
Yeah, no, that's a true story, and you know, those were the crew cut guys I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's really funny. My older cousin was one of those guys, and you know, a few years later, 1957, Elvis bought Graceland. And I had known him since '54. We'd gone to, you know, besides the football games, all-night movies at the Memphian Theater,
So
go
cool.
to the amusement park, do the rides, you know, roller coaster and stuff all night. So I knew Elvis pretty well. I was too young to go to work for him.
Right.
And when he moved to Graceland, I would go up there quite regularly. So one of the first times I was there, and my cousin was an all-Memphis football player at Humes High. So, you know, we're out in the backyard at Graceland, and there used to be a gazebo there with a jukebox, and summer times we'd be out there. And so I was telling Elvis, I said, yeah, hey, Elvis, you know, my cousin is David. I'm not going to say the last name right now to protect the or the guilty. And he just walked away from me. And and George Klein was there, and George said, Jerry, that was one of the guys that harassed Elvis in high school. And I went,
oh, wow.
I was just trying to do some cool conversation, you know. So, yeah, my cousin was one of those guys.
Wow. Doc, do you have a question for Jerry Schilling?
I'm really curious. You were around during his music career. Did you see anything special about that when he was starting the music?
Well, yes. I mean, when he was at Sun, I didn't go to the studio. You know, I mean, that was Sam Phillips, Elvis, Scotty, and Bill, and certainly later DJ. I mean, it wasn't like the guys hung around in the studio at Sun. But later on, when I went to work for him in 1964, I would, you know, I went everywhere with Elvis. I lived with him. I lived at Graceland, and then I lived out here in Hollywood in Bel Air with him. But I never will forget the first recording session that I went to in '64 in Nashville at RCA. I guess the famous Studio B. I didn't know all that stuff at the time, you know. I was a poor guy from Memphis, you know, living on, as Elvis was originally, the poor side of town. But going up to Nashville, what I remember the most is the other guys, the older guys who had been working with Elvis, you know, they were used to all of the recording and stuff. They were playing poker out front of the Nashville. And it was like going to a play on Broadway where you hear the orchestra kind of tuning up before the play starts. And I remember being there and I was watching Elvis record. And that night, I've never seen anything like this since or at that time. Was the night he recorded How Great Thou Art.
Wow.
And I just happened to be sitting across the room. And when he finished that song, he turned pale white. And he dropped down to his knees. It was like his soul had left his body or something. And he just happened to look up, and I just happened to be in that line of vision. And he did that little Elvis boyish smile, like he knew he had done something great. And then, of course, that was his first Grammy and one of his only 3. And they were all in gospel music.
Amazing. He had such a desire for gospel music and such a passion for gospel music, and that's so well deserved. Yeah. Now, you worked for Elvis for 25 years, Jerry. In 1964, you actually moved inside to Graceland. Tell me what that was like. What was it like living with Elvis Presley at Graceland?
Well, it was, my mother died when I was an infant. And, I lived with my grandparents, wonderful, poor, salt of the earth people. My grandfather was a house painter, and my uncles worked with him, and they painted houses. And, I really didn't have a home, if you will. When I went to work for Elvis, and we came out to Hollywood that night. That night it was a 2-week bus. Elvis drove every mile of the Winnebago bus, if you will. Not like the buses that the stars drive in today.
Right.
But I was thrilled out here. Elvis lived in Bel Air at the time. He was doing the movies. This, when we were getting ready to start, was Tickle Me. But we got in late. Everybody went to bed, and I couldn't go to bed. I mean, it was like indirect lighting, and there was a pool in the backyard. And Presley now, but to top that, we finished the movie, to the drive all the way back, LA to Memphis, 2,000 miles.
Right.
And on crossing the bridge over the Mississippi River, I'll never forget this, leaving West Memphis, Arkansas, going into Memphis.
Right.
And Elvis said, Harry, I'd like for you to stay at Graceland.
Wow.
And I went, wow. And I'm be cool, I'm going, oh, okay, sure. But going to bed that night, my room was downstairs by the TV room and the pool room.
Yeah.
Not a very showcase room. It was where they stored the Christmas stuff. You could see the pipes with the insulin wrapped around them, and
right.
It was the safest, most wonderful feeling I'd ever had in my life. It was a great one. And on a day-to-day basis, it was really a home, It was, we had parties there at nighttime, downstairs. But in the daytime, you would get up and I'd go in the kitchen, and Grandma Presley would be having lunch, and it would be breakfast for us. So we'd stay up going, and was like the most peaceful. And when I go back there now for, a rare occasion or whatever,
Right.
it still has that peaceful, warm feeling about it.
Yep.
And I have a piece of, I call it Graceland West, in 1974, where I'm speaking from. Elvis bought me my home here in California.
Oh.
And
wow, so cool.
oh, yeah, I'm out on the balcony now, and I remember he and I walked out here when he had shown me the house, and he said, you never had a home. I wanted to be the one to give you one. That's the kind of person.
Wow, that's
and
so great. And what people don't know is when they go on the tour of Graceland and they go downstairs and they go to the TV room and they go to the pool room, and right there as you're walking to the TV room on the right side, that's the door to your room where you lived for many years, which is actually very, very cool.
Yeah, when I was doing press for my book 20 years ago, I guess, me and a guy named Elvis, they did an interview. Doc Walker on Elvis Radio did an interview with me at Graceland at nighttime when it was closed. And,
Okay.
we had Jack Soden and Priscilla gave me full access to the house. And we were talking, and I was talking about my room. And I said, on the interview, I said, in the wintertime, if it rained, water would get into my room and I'd have to take a plank. And even if I had a girlfriend, would take a plank where it wouldn't get, 2-3 inches of water to go over to the couch or,
Wow.
in this little room. So Angie, who is the head of the archives at Graceland, said...
Angie Marchese, right? Yep.
Angie Marchese, she said,
yep.
Jerry, would you like to see your room?
Uh-huh.
At that point, I hadn't seen it in, 30 years or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I said, are you kidding? Yeah. So she gets the keys. She opens up the door, and the people that were doing the documentary said, what is this little monitor thing here? And Angie said, well, it used to flood down here, so this is, monitors it. And they said, that story was true that you were telling us? I don't have to make up stories.
Oh, man.
And, yeah, so it's not, there's 2 bedrooms that you don't go into at Graceland.
Right.
Just for different reasons. It's mine and Elvis's.
And Elvis's. Yeah, and then you tell a story of one morning you wake up at Graceland and you thought you heard a radio upstairs and you heard music coming from on the upstairs. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was later in '64, and we had some people. Elvis had some people, all of us, the night before downstairs, and anyway, the next morning, it was probably midday, I hear this music. And I go, wow. I'm down at the basement in my room. And I thought, well, did somebody leave a record player or something on? So everybody else was asleep because it had been like normal, a very late night, early dawn morning. So I walk upstairs and look into the living room, and in the piano room, there is Elvis singing his heart out by himself.
Wow.
You'll Never Walk Alone. It was so powerful that it scared me because I thought, oh my God, I'm interrupting a great private moment. And Elvis saw that, and as he was still singing, he just kind of winked with a little smile to say it's cool. And that was second to how great thou art. I left.
Amazing.
I ended my book with because of him. I've never had to walk alone, and my thought was experiencing that great moment. I mean, can you imagine?
What a memory! Wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine being the only person hearing Elvis sing his heart out in his own home on his own piano?
Wow.
God, I'm getting chill bumps even thinking about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
quite a moment.
Jerry, what about the Jungle Room? Can you tell us a little bit about that? People always comment about the Jungle Room.
Well, when I first went to work for Elvis, I had gone to college on a football scholarship in Arkansas, and I got hurt my junior year. I came back to Memphis, and I was working a few jobs, and what I would do, it was kind of like a Superman thing. I had this old 49 Plymouth that I would have to stop every so often and put oil in it. I kept a case of oil in the trunk. But what was good is I went to University of Memphis to finish my college, but I would load trucks like 3 nights a week, and so it kind of worked because you load trucks from like 5 p.m. to about 11 o'clock, and for a guy going to college, it was really good money then. And so what I would do though, I kept a change of clothes in the back of the car, and Elvis would rent the movie theater, the Memphian, after it closed, 11 o'clock or whatever. So on the way home, I would drive by the Memphian and theater, and if I saw in the back Elvis's Cadillac and the cars and stuff, then I would go to, we call the fill-in station, the service gas station, and I would change clothes, and then go back and knock on the door, and then one of the guys, Red or Richard or one of them, would check and see who was there, and I would act like I just showed up for the movie. And so this night I drove by, and sure enough, there were the cars. I went and did my Superman change. I couldn't go there all sweaty and whatever from loading trucks for 5 hours. And so I went in. Richard was there, Richard Davis, one of the guys, great guy. And I saw Elvis down by the screen, and he was getting ready to leave. And he kind of looked up at me. I'm at the other end of the theater, and I didn't want to bother him. I just got there. I said, okay, he's leaving. So Richard says, Elvis had access to all of the films in the Mid-South. It was called the Mid-South Film Exchange. And he was such a film buff that there were books that would say to the theater owners what the new films were coming out and or what the current ones were. And Elvis would go through that. And Richard and Alan Fortas, these guys would have keys to the film exchange. And they would go down to the film exchange and tell Elvis what films there were. And he would look up in his book and tell him which ones to pull for the all-night movie. So Richard said, do you want to go with me to take the film back to the film exchange, and then we could, have a breakfast or something? And I said, Richard, it's I'm kind of tired. Let's do it tomorrow. He said, well, we can't do it tomorrow because we're going back to California. I said, okay.
Wow.
We get to the film exchange, and Elvis calls Richard and says, do you know where I can find Jerry Schilling? And Richard said, he's here with me. And he said, ask him if he'll come out to the house. We never called it Graceland. It was always the house within the city. And he said, ask him if he'll come out to the house. And I said, sure. And I went there, and it was really late. It was not dawn yet, and I'm kind of out in the front porch. Richard goes to bed, and Elvis and his father come down from upstairs. And so Elvis starts talking to me. He said, Jerry, I need you to come to work for me. And I said, when? And he said, well, now. You know, that's how Elvis thought. And I said, well, can I go home and get some clothes? I had to quit college. I was going to practice teach my next semester. I was chosen to one person to practice teach in the education department. I had two jobs, the truck job and the airline. I worked ticket counter early in the morning.
Right.
And I had to tell my father. And I said, so he said, well, we're leaving today. So I do all this stuff. And I go back, and what you asked about, the jungle room was a screened-in back porch at that time.
Right.
And you know, I get there, and everybody's asleep. You know, it's daytime, and I sit out on that screen porch by myself. You know, God, I wonder if he's going to change his mind. We didn't leave until that night, but that's what became the Jungle Room.
Right.
So what gave it the title of the Jungle Room? I don't know. This is a few years later, and Elvis had it enclosed, and we used it to really watch football games on the big screen. You know, there was just a little small screens downstairs that we, used to use. And Vernon Presley had been out shopping, and he came back and, Elvis, I just saw the ugliest furniture I've ever seen. I think it was Goldsmith's department store. And I said, well, let's go look at it. And that was the furniture at the Jungle Room. Elvis said, I love it. Let's buy it. So
wow.
That's how the screened-in porch became the Jungle Room.
Right. And it was pretty much known as the Den most of the time, right?
Say that again?
It was almost known as the Den, right? Elvis would often call it the Den, right?
Yeah.
Off to the back.
Yeah. And, it was kind of cool because it was right off the kitchen. If he wanted something, there was before it was the end of the house. Now it was an addition, but there was like a window, and he could have Pauline or Lottie,
sure,
the ladies in the kitchen who were part of the family as well. He could have them, see if he needed anything, and it was just really cool. And I was just thinking, of Elvis's legacy, and we talked about rhythm and blues, and we talked to the what would have been termed maids at that time, which is fine. They were part of the family, and Martin Luther King Day.
right.
I think Elvis did an awful lot to cross the boundaries between segregation and through his music and example, which he never bragged or took credit for or whatever, but
right.
Just listen to If I Could Dream.
Exactly.
In the Ghetto. I was with him the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were out here at MGM Studios. I was his stand-in the movie as well as working for him. and we were in his trailer, and we were just getting ready to leave the trailer, and there was a TV up in the corner of the trailer he always had going on, and it said breaking news, and it wasn't like CNN today where every hour is breaking news, and it said Memphis, Tennessee. So both Elvis and I stopped, and it was to announce the assassination in Memphis, Tennessee of Martin Luther King, and it just really emotionally hit Elvis.
Yes.
And he just looked down and with water in his eyes. I remember his quote. He just said very softly, he always told the truth. And I think about that, especially like today. Elvis was not only a pioneer in music, he was a pioneer in humanity. And that's why earlier in the conversation I said everybody didn't like him in the beginning. Guess what?
Right.
He won over those people. They loved him.
Wow.
And I think he set out his mission to be loved by everybody. He wanted to help everybody. He really sincerely did. And that's more than sideburns and peanut butter and that's the Elvis I remember.
Right. How did he deal with the fans, Jerry? I know the fans were very important to him. How did he deal with the fans hanging out down by the gate 24/7? What was that like for him?
Well, I think he loved it. I've never seen an artist that felt as close to his fans, and I know Song represents them now that have a great fan base. But Elvis looked at them more as friends than fans, I think. We would, especially in LA, some of those people at the gate and stuff.
Right.
Hey, don't forget, for a few years, I was one of those people at the gate. So I consider me one of those people, and but Elvis had a unique relationship with the fans, and some of them not only we got to experience a friendship with Elvis. He would say, have them come in. We'll listen to some music or whatever. He, he was just appreciative.
Right.
Of
I know.
the love he received. He felt it was a two-way street.
Sure.
And I don't know. As big a star, there's no bigger star than Elvis Presley. He never, ever forgot or thought he was better than the fan base who made him.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, George Klein was a mutual friend of mine and yours as well. I was a correspondent on his show, The Elvis Hour, back in the day, and George would often tell me, Elvis would be in a rush with Joe Esposito, and people would come up to him for an autograph or for a picture, and Elvis would always stop, no matter what he was doing, no matter what kind of a rush he was in, and he would stop, take a picture, and sign an autograph. Now, I think a lot of celebrities today should learn from that, right, Jerry?
Yeah, no, I thought we were going to miss a lot of flights because of that. And I was like, come on, Elvis, we got to go,
Yeah.
or we're going to miss the, the movie or whatever. It's really funny, the influence that my friend has made, but now, because of my relationship with Elvis and I go to certain events from time to time around the world and whatever, and I really now understand Elvis's feeling. And if anybody, and they do because of my relationship with Elvis, ask me for an autograph, I'm going to do it because I, from osmosis,
Mm-hmm.
I have the feeling, and I totally get it.
Wow. Now, Jerry, you were there when the Beatles came to LA and hung out with Elvis. You were actually in the room and they had a jam session. Tell us about that.
Well, there's been so many articles and whatever, and opinions and whatever about that night.
Right.
It was a great night. Elvis wasn't used to, nor did he, on any type of regular basis, have film stars or music people up at his house.
Right.
The Beatles, I was a huge Beatle fan, so I was all excited. But it was just a fun, great night. Nobody knew what to do. Elvis wasn't having huge success recording. He was doing some of the movies that he didn't want to do at the time.
Uh-huh.
I wish it had been with Elvis at the top of his career and the Beatles were at the top of their career. But you know what? It didn't make any difference. There was a mutual admiration, and the Beatles, we walked into the den after Elvis and Priscilla greeted them and all of us guys at the front door. And we go into the den, and Elvis had this habit of turning on the TV, no sound, and he would play a bass guitar. And he would have, music on a record player, and he would play the bass line. He would play it so loud, you could walk out in the street in front of the house in Bel Air, and you could feel the ground vibrating, literally.
Amazing.
So, Elvis was there, and Elvis, he loved English humor. So he looked at the guys and said, if you're going to sit here and stare at me all night, I'm going to bed. And they died laughing, all of them, including Elvis.
Wow.
And that broke the ice. And it was just,
Awesome.
Put on a Charlie Rich, Mohair Sam. Elvis played the bass part. I think Larry Geller and George went down and looked at the lights at the pool. Then the Colonel was there with Brian Epstein.
Okay.
At a portable roulette table, and there was a little roulette playing. Me and Billy Smith played pool against Ringo and their tour manager, Mel Evans.
Wow.
It was that kind of night, and just a lot of good camaraderie. As we're walking out, I'm walking beside John, who was the ultimate to me. And I'm good friends with Paul, but John was like, and John said, "Hey Jerry, we're playing the Hollywood Bowl, and we're staying up on Benedict Canyon. I know Elvis doesn't get out, but can't get out. But if you want to drop by, please do."
Wow. So cool.
Oh, yeah. I never had any intention of doing it. I knew the house. It had 7 bedrooms, and they leased it out here in Beverly Hills, and it was a potential of Elvis's lease because the one we were leasing in Perugia Way where Elvis met the Beatles.
Oh.
So ironically, the next day I get up and everybody's still asleep. It's middle of the afternoon, and I go take a motorcycle ride. So I get on my motorcycle and and there's a girl kind of looking over the gate. She was very pretty. And so I'm really shy, and and she said, "Could you give me a ride down to Sunset? We're up in Beverly Hills above Sunset Boulevard." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So she gets on the back of my motorcycle, and I don't know what to say to her. I was shy, believe it or not, and I've made up for it. But we're going down Sunset Boulevard, and she said, "You know, the Beatles are in town." I said, "Yeah." So I said, "Do you want to meet them?"
There you go.
And we're just approaching the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I drive up there, and I go past. I'm approaching the house, and there's police, and they're waving me and people on. Thinking, "Oh God, how embarrassing!" So I'm going, and Mel Evans comes out. "No, he's okay. He's okay." And so the police let me come back in with the girl, and I spent the afternoon
So cool.
with the Beatles, and they were playing the Hollywood Bowl that night.
Wow.
And so I'm out on this little patio, and there's John, George, and Paul, and we're sitting there. Ringo's inside. He's on the phone with his wife back up in England. And John says to me, "Jerry, would you do me a favor?" I'm going, "Yeah, sure. What?" And he pointed to his sideburns. And he said, "You see these sideburns?" And I said, "Well, yeah. I'm used to sideburns." And he said, "I didn't have the nerve to tell Elvis last night, but I wanted to look like him."
Wow.
And I almost got kicked out of high school because of that. And he said, "We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him."
Amazing.
And yeah, so I'm there for a while. I think I better get back to my day job, Elvis. And I get back to our home on Perugia Way. That's 25 Perugia Way, right off of Bellagio.
Wow.
And Elvis is in the den kind of by himself. And I told him what John had said. And it was almost like that little smile at the end of How Great Thou Art. He just didn't say anything. It was just that smile. And he wound up recording 3 Beatles songs. So
amazing.
Thinks that there was, a competition thing between Elvis and the Beatles. They didn't know about it.
Right. Another cool thing you did with Elvis, I want to just touch on real quick before we have to go here, is 1971, Elvis was into collecting police badges, and you went to the White House with Elvis and met President Nixon. You were in the room, in the Oval Office with him. Tell us about that, Jerry, real quick.
It's hard to tell about quick.
I know.
Yeah. I wasn't working for Elvis at the time, and he called me. The only time he ever went out alone, taking flights and stuff. And I'm working as a film editor at Paramount. And he calls me and asks me if I would meet him at the airport in Los Angeles. He was changing planes in Dallas. And I said, "Well, who's with you?" And he said, "Nobody. And I don't want anybody in the world to know where I am."
Wow.
Of course, I picked him up. We spent the night at his home that it was being sold in a different home in Beverly Hills. And the next day, we got there, it was late at night, and he had promised all the stewardesses that he would give them a ride home. He let me have a limousine driver. So we get back to the house, and he said, "Well, let's get some rest and we'll catch up tomorrow." get some sleep. And he goes to his bedroom, and I go, I can't go to sleep. I'm the only guy in the world that knows where Elvis Presley lives. Vernon, his father, Priscilla, his wife, it could be kidnapped or whatever. So I stay up all night, and the next day we have coffee. It was like two friends catching up. I hadn't seen him in a while. And then he asked me if I'd go to Washington. He said he needs to go to Washington. I said, look, I will lose my job at Paramount. I can't. And bottom line, he was hard to say no to. Right. And we get on an all-night flight. He writes a letter to the President of the United States. He asked me to proofread it. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm proofreading a letter. The most popular guy in the world, the most powerful guy in the world. Uh-huh. And I could have made some grammatical changes or whatever. I just said, and I felt it was a true American story. And I just said, Elvis is great just the way it is.
Amazing.
We dropped it off at dawn I don't know if it was the West Wing Guard Gate at the White House. I tried to talk. I was not doing it because I've been up now almost 2 days. I want to go to the hotel, and
Sure.
And he insisted. And bottom line is, I didn't want to tell him there was no way that he was going to meet the president, but he said in his letter to the president, "I'm incognito. You can contact my personal public relations man, Jerry Schilling." Wow. He's telling the president of the United States that. I get the call from Eagle Blood Crow. The president's read Mr. Presley's letter and would like to meet him in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And we wound up in the Oval Room of the White House. There's a lot of stories within that confines of that story, but I know we're running out of time here.
Yeah. Doc, you have something for Jerry Schilling?
I was going to ask him about some of the actresses you were talking about, the pretty girls. And did you ever meet Anne Margaret or anybody else that was in a movie that was with him? Because you were hanging around him a lot, Jerry.
Well, I was a stand-in for 8 movies. I was his photo double for 3, and of course I did.
Wow.
Sometimes by accident we dated the same person. But anyway, I'm gonna skip over that. But Anne was the first lady that I met when I came out in '64, and
she was beautiful.
Yeah,
she's so beautiful.
She was just lovely. She came up later that night when everybody was asleep, and I was sitting in the den thinking, God, I'm living with Elvis Presley, and I'm in Bel Air, and the next day, I thought somebody was intruding in the house. She came in late, and I heard all these stories about security, and anyway, I remember saying, "Miss," and she screamed because it was all dark, and then Elvis's door to his room opened up, and he thought that was the funniest thing. So the next day, we're watching television, and I'm trying to be cool, but I mean, come on, let's face it. I'm sitting there, as I was used to, and Anne Margaret, and I'm drinking a glass of water. I don't realize I'm pouring it all over my leg, but she was amazing. They had a great chemistry.
Yes.
Shelley Fabre was another one.
She was gorgeous.
She was Shelley did, I think, 3 movies with Elvis, and they never dated, but they had a great friendship and respect. And I mean, Donna Douglas from the Beverly Hillbillies, and Frankie and Johnny. I mean,
yeah.
She
was gorgeous.
Yeah, as well. I have so many memories, but I could go on and on. But that tells you something when you ask the question. It wasn't like it was like a band of brothers. It wasn't like workers and there's the boss.
Right.
It was, if you look at the Entourage series, it was more like that, you know.
Wow.
A bunch of guys, their friend became a big star. He comes to Hollywood. He takes his friends with him, and they live together, and they work together, and they have fun together, and they cry together, and that's the story of the Memphis Mafia.
Wow, that's
I have
amazing.
another quick one. Don't forget Yvonne Craig, because I mean, my Batman friends, and Jerry, Jimmy will tell you, Batman friends will go crazy if we don't mention Batgirl.
Oh, you know,
she was so sweet.
I wasn't there. I did not know Yvonne, to be honest with you. So
it's okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't. But Batman, the originals were the two guys, Batman and Robin.
Right.
They were friends with Red Weston. I got to know them.
Wow.
One of them went into music merchandising, and when I was originally managing the Beach Boys, came and wanted to be the merchandising guy for the Beach Boys.
Wow, you're full of stuff there, Jerry. That's amazing. I didn't know the Beach Boys. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jerry is still the manager of the Beach Boys.
I'm with them now. But I managed them in the beginning for 10 years, from 76 to 86, and I've been back with them for the last 5 years.
Wow. Amazing. I just talked to Bobby Figueroa not long ago, and I did an interview with him, and he was an amazing person.
Love Bobby.
Bobby's a great guy.
Bobby's a great guy. It was kind of an interesting story. I was Billy Joel's tour manager in '75.
So cool. Yeah.
Music business.
You're full of surprises, Jerry.
Yeah.
You're full of so many surprises.
I know. Hopefully full of truth, not full of the yes word. But anyway. And Billy opened for the Beach Boys. That's how I, for a couple of weeks, and that's how the Beach Boys asked me to come to work for them, and I was their assistant tour manager, and I was their tour manager for a short period of time, and then I became their manager for 10 years.
Wow! If you can get Billy, if you can get,
asked me to come back a little over 4.5 years ago.
Wow, if you can get Billy Joel for us, we'd really appreciate that, because that will definitely bring our ratings up as well. But you're an amazing person, Jerry.
I learned so much working with Billy. That's where I really learned the music business, and his wife Elizabeth was his manager, and she was really a leading edge on the women's move to get respect, and she really taught me a lot, and I love Billy. Probably the deepest intelligent person I ever worked with. He does this little, which is part of him too, but motorcycle fighter image, but he's also a consummate reader, and as we know, piano player, and Billy's. I've been very blessed to work with some of the greats.
Amazing. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We could do a couple of hours with you, man. Really. I could talk to you like all night. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was nice talking with both of you. And
thank you, Jerry.
Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. Thanks, you. Jerry. Take care. Have a great night.
Love to the fans.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Wow. That was so good. Jimmy, that was amazing.
Thank you, man. It was a great interview. We learned a lot about Elvis and the Beatles. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
he's got. I mean, we could do like a month worth of shows with Gary, and it'll just keep going. He's got so many stories. It was so nice, so nice of him to come on the show. And next week on Monday, we got coming up on the show Tom Dreesen, who is a famous comedian, and he opened for Frank Sinatra for many, many, many years. And we'll talk to Tom Dreesen about that. So we're looking forward to that on Monday.
Cool.
And thanks for everybody listening to the show and watching the show. We really appreciate it. And any parting shots, Doc G?
Just want to say, maybe by next week we'll be back on Facebook, but for right now we're on YouTube, and the link is right. I sent it right to you. The show's there. You share it, and we should be good. But next week we should be back on Facebook. All goes well, and of course we'll be on YouTube too. So we'll be on both places.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Doc G, and thanks so much for all the listeners being out there. We'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good day. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.